For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Motsabi Hoyani. Today we have a tete-a-tete with Julian and Ena Hewitt about why they left their middle-class comforts for a shack in the townships of Mamelodi for a month. What made you as a white South African family decide to go and live for a month in Mamelodi, a black township?
We wanted to challenge ourselves. We wanted to get out of our comfort zone, out of our middle-class bubble, and to experience the life that so many people in South Africa live on a daily basis. So this was an exercise in empathy for us and one in understanding, and it was based on some of the things we'd done in the past as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd often travel to some poorer areas and developing countries, and it had been quite a unique experience for us, and we'd really enjoyed those community interactions. And so I suppose our default is why not, when most people would ask why. And I think it's really important that we have a good understanding of our country. It's not just an interesting experience because it's another country, it's interesting and important because it's our country.
Where did you stay in Mamelodi and how were you received, and did you make any new friends?
We stayed in an area of Mamelodi called Phomolong, which is the shacklands of Mamelodi. Obviously, there are other areas in Mamelodi that have bonded houses, RDP houses, quite upmarket suburbs. But we stayed in an area where there was no water or no electricity, and only communal taps. So within this area of Phomolong, we stayed in a 3x3 meter shack, which we rented for 170 Rand for the month.
Yeah, and I think just in terms of friends, we were just overwhelmed by the people that really appreciated us being there. Language was a little bit tough. We kind of used Afrikaans as our second language, at least mine, and most people could also communicate in Afrikaans. But I really had some special conversations with people. Would love walking around in the afternoon with the kids and greeting people, dumelang, lekai thing, really just reaching out and just exploring the community that we were in. That was really special. And then obviously we particularly got to know the people on our street very well, and we didn't have a TV set, and our TV set was sitting around a fireplace each evening and chatting and catching up and laughing and finding out how the day went, and that was really where we had some really great opportunities to interact with some of the local Phomolong residents.
Your mission was driven by the belief that empathy underpins a healthy democracy. Can you elaborate more on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'd just say that empathy at its simplest is really being able to walk in someone else's shoes for a mile or whatever the distance might be, and that gives you a much better sense of context into where that person comes from, and it just creates a common platform to interact and relate to that person, and I think that's what's really crucial in a country like South Africa. We come from a very divisive history, and it's important that we have a common ground, that we can actually have a starting point to have real conversations. And so not only does empathy provide that space, but it also provides an experience to refer back to. So we're not speaking about what we read in a blog or in a book. We experienced it ourselves, and that gives us so much more meaning.
Yeah, it definitely just makes you so much more aware of the challenges other people face. And as soon as you really get a better personal understanding, like Julian said, where it's not just academic one, then you can start experiencing true empathy and moving yourself beyond that, so that you don't just look at things you read in the newspaper or whatever and critique it from your own point of view. You can actually start seeing why some of those things happen and why people react the way they do, because you can understand it because you've been there yourself and to a small extent understood it. Look, after a month we're not experts by any means, but we know more now than we did before. We are not the experts on township living by any means.
And I think there's two really important aspects to empathy in terms of crossing bridges. So the first is obviously there's a black-white divide. But the other aspect where empathy is becoming a lot more disconnected in South African society is a rich-poor one, and that's not just around racial demographics either. So I think it's quite crucial to get that opportunity to meet people where they're at, because if you start disconnecting yourself with the common people, then it's really, really hard for you to have a sense of empathy as a result.
What are some of the tensions and intricacies of South African black life that you observed during your stay in Mamelodi that you would not have seen if you had merely been a tourist?
One of the things we did, we carried on working during that time, and the children still had to go to school. So we carried on with our normal lives. We also restricted ourselves to a budget that we thought was representative of what the people in a similar kind of setting live off. So that immediately changes it from a tourist one to one where you are living like the people to a certain extent, because you have those same challenges of getting to and from work. And we realized after our month there that 47% of our budget, almost half of our budget, just went into transport. And again, if you just come in on a bus or even for a day or two, you wouldn't have been aware of just how significant that cost and that burden is on people in that income bracket. So,
and it's an incredibly tough life, incredibly tough. We don't want to by any means romanticize it. It really was a difficult month, and for us to live through it, it was really difficult too. And what it also kind of showed us is how important that sense of Ubuntu community is, because nobody else cares about you, if we're really frank about it. You're just a nameless, faceless person in another shack in another township in South Africa, and if there was anything that happened to you, there's no one else that's going to protect you against that. Police presence was very limited. You don't have insurance policies to hide behind. You've just got the people around you, so they're really your link to being able to survive in such a tough environment.
You attracted both flak and frenzy during your stretch in Mamelodi. Where did it come from and why?
Yeah, so to start off with, we were overwhelmed with the positivity that we received. And so that would have to be the starting point. But we definitely had people that didn't agree with what we're doing, didn't agree with our motives. And there were two interesting perspectives on that. We had like a white South African perspective, and that even came across from friends and family that said, are you really being responsible as parents taking your children into a township setting? And then there were a whole list of social ills that people often mediarize, and that's their context. A lot of white South Africans have very little direct experience with a township, and what they understand in terms of township life is what they read about in the media. So they were really projecting a lot of those issues onto why we're being irresponsible parents. And so, at the end of the day, we also said, yes, those are risks, we're aware of them, but at the same time, while people might say we're being irresponsible as parents, the flip side for us is we feel that if we want our kids to grow up in an integrated South Africa, it's like a lot more responsible to show them the real world and give them the social skills to be able to understand and interact with people at different strata. So that was the one critique we got. The other critique we got from black South Africans, particularly young black professional South Africans who would have come from really tough contexts like townships themselves, that did everything in their power to get out of that, was, surely this is patronizing of people in townships and glamorizing poverty. We had some pretty tough stuff that came our way from some people at this level. And so what we found quite interesting about it was the nuance in that was often there's a lot of anger that had obviously not been properly resolved. The reality is the status quo for a lot of South Africans hasn't changed, and you can completely understand why there should still be some bitterness. But the kind of interesting nuance was that these individuals would often be a lot more comfortable if we'd been an American family going into a township context, because then we're experiencing African culture and it's an adventure. Whereas now, because we're a white South African family, we're part of the problem that created this context in the first place. And poverty is not our domain, so we should stay well away.
And then, of course, there are also the critiques who said we did it for the publicity or the this or that, which is also complete nonsense. We didn't invite any media attention. It has come, and we have spoken to media because we think it's an important conversation to be had in the country, but it's certainly not why we're doing it, and we're definitely not making money out of it or anything like that. So, yeah.
And that's a good point that Ena makes as well, in that it caught us completely off guard why this should be so newsworthy. It really was our own personal journey. We got a blog going and a Twitter account just so we could share our experiences with maybe family and friends and their friends. And it's a big problem for us that this is actually so newsworthy, because it shouldn't be. Why should it be so newsworthy for a white family to spend 30 days in a shack when most South Africans live like this every day? So in some ways, like, we inadvertently walked into this massive social chasm in our country to show that there really are some issues that haven't been properly resolved. A lot of people are completely disconnected with the reality of a lot of our people. So, you know, it was definitely quite a crazy situation, but as Ena said, it was important for us to still have the conversation. And we're doing this for our reasons. And people might not always have agreed with us, but we weren't going to let their opinion stop us, at least asking, like, South Africans to think a little bit more around some of the issues that we were experiencing over that month.
You have remarked that white South Africans must make a great effort to understand how the poor live. What do you think is the virtue of this endeavour?
We still live in a very divided society. If you look at the census statistics, white South Africans on average still earn 6 times what your average black South African earns, and you can't get away from that. And it's not just a black-white thing anymore, but it's an economic thing to a large extent, although I think a lot of black people are closer to or know more people in contexts like this, whereas it really is very easy to live in a complete bubble as a middle class white person. You just build higher walls, you know, you do outsource everything to private security firms, private education, you shop in different shops, you can easily become oblivious to the realities around you, and that is not healthy at all. That's not the way. If we want our children to grow up in this country, that's not the way it's going to happen. Yeah.
So I mean, the data will tell you that South Africa as a society is getting more skewed in terms of income inequality rather than less skewed. And our futures as South Africans are completely tied to the futures of people living in shacks. And if their dreams and aspirations go unmet, it is going to open up a very wide space for people to come in and start asking a lot more populist questions around why should there still be such a great income inequality. And so I think it's important as white South Africans to appreciate this. It's important as well for white South Africans to be more engaged in these conversations. I think by and large, a generalization from my side would be that white South Africans have almost decided to sit back and say, I can't be part of any national conversation anymore, because as soon as I do, then I get labelled as this and that, and therefore I'm going to sit back and just do my own thing and live in my own world, and that's not very helpful either. We're completely connected to the future of this country, and I'd prefer that we start the conversations now rather than populist leaders come in and actually create the context for us, which is very unhelpful.
What is your hope for the future of South Africa?
Well, we love this country dearly, and we want to continue staying here. Our hope, obviously, is that it prospers, the growth, continues, and that the income inequality does start getting less, because we need that to a very large extent. We need people, not through forced means, but because of education and upliftment, to become more equal and have equal opportunities. So,
I mean, I'd say I'd love South Africans to build more bridges rather than higher walls. And I can say from experience that those bridges are incredibly powerful, because we've often built the walls in our minds. That's where they are. But once you can actually get over that, there really is a tremendous amount of love in this country. And so it's important for us to place less emphasis on our government providing the magic wand to waving away all these social changes and evils that we need to, but asking the question, like, what are you doing as a white South African? What are you doing as a black South African? What are you doing as a South African to be an active citizen? Because these are all of our problems. And what are the small ways in which you can make a difference? So I'd love South Africans to be more active citizens. And then lastly, I mean, we showed that you can survive in a tough place like Mamelodi. Even if it was just for 1 month, you can survive. But surely we want people to be thriving rather than just surviving. And as Ena said, how can we create the opportunities for people that have the potential to have that realized? And education is a key part of that, that we just haven't got right in our country yet.
That was Julian and Ena Hewitt talking about the apartheid system's impact on the reality of South Africa's haves and have-nots.